Hello and welcome, Sounds True friends. Great to be with you. My name's Tami Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it is an utter delight to be your host for this session, partnering with your nervous system in uncertain times, like the times we're in, with Sounds True author, friend, and polyvagal theory expert Deb Dana. I want to welcome those here who have enrolled in Deb's upcoming course with Sounds True. It's called Creating a Sanctuary Within, and also to extend a special invitation for those of you who have not joined the course. Today's event is designed to give you a taste of what you'll experience across the 6-week program. It's 6 weekly classes and 2 live Q&A sessions with Deb. And you can learn more about the course, Creating a Sanctuary Within, by either clicking the link in the chat if you're with us here on Sounds True 1, or if you're on the player page, you can simply hit the Learn More button. Many of you already know Deb, but briefly, for those of you who are meeting her here for the first time, clinician, consultant, author, I describe her as a powerful regulating force being in her presence. She is one of the world's leading experts in making polyvagal theory clear, relatable, and accessible, helping us befriend and feel safe in our nervous system. Deb's latest work with Sounds True is her new book. It's called The Nervous System Workbook. And the new course, is based on the workbook. It includes 50 different practices. And in today's special webinar, Deb is going to introduce us to 2 of the practices from the Nervous System Workbook. Deb, welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you. Lovely. Yeah. And I love that we're in uncertain times and are able to do this, right? Because we are in uncertain times and our nervous systems are feeling that uncertainty, certainly.
They are certainly feeling that uncertainty.
Yes.
Here at the beginning, I wonder if you can share a bit about your intention for the course, especially as you're describing the uncertainty that we're in and this notion of creating a sanctuary within ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was writing the workbook, I was envisioning people who don't know their nervous system yet and how to invite them into that process safely and gently so that they can begin to partner with their nervous system and navigate the world a bit differently. So the course came about as a way to give people a way to dip their toe in, right? The full workbook, takes you through a process of really deepening into the knowing your nervous system. The course gives you the fundamentals, the basics, so that you can begin to understand, where am I, what's happening in my nervous system, and what are some of the ways I can shape my system in the direction of connection. Right, because we have 2 directions. We have a direction of protection, direction of connection, that our nervous system simply takes us on. So, the workbook is, first of all, get to know, information gathering. Where am I? What's going on? How do I know my system? And then secondly, how do I begin to shape it in a new direction? Yeah.
One of the things I'm particularly excited about in the course and in this time we have together here today is you personally taking our hand and being our guide into 2 of these practices. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit about that, the power of being connected and guided as we do this work.
Yeah. I mean, our nervous systems long for connection, right? It's a biological imperative. It's something we have to have in order to thrive, to survive in the beginning, but then to thrive over the course of our lifetime. So, the practices that we're going to do, you can do on your own, and I'm happy to guide, and you could do them and then share them with someone, right? There are lots of different ways to engage with your nervous system. I think a part of it, the connecting with another human, is important. But there are a lot of different ways you can do it, right? And I'm delighted to journey with you into your nervous system today, and then we'll hear from some of our participants where they've gone in their nervous system. That's the joy that I get out of doing this work. I get to take autonomic journeys, go on autonomic adventures with people, right? But I also have people who do work on their own and then send me responses, what happened for them, and we have that connection in that way. So yeah.
Now, your very first practice that we're going to do together is called Flavors of States.
Mhm.
What do we need to know as a preparatory groundwork to even appreciate that
Right,
there are states and flavors of states?
right. Right. So, give you the sort of brief overview of what is called the autonomic hierarchy, which is the three states that our nervous system moves through all the time, and it moves through those states in a specific order. So the at the top of the hierarchy, the place that I think our nervous systems long to be, and I think they know how to get there, given the opportunity, is the state of regulation. That's called ventral vagal. In the workbook, we simply call it regulation, right? So the state of regulation where I'm organized enough, safe enough, present enough, but the cues of safety that are coming toward me outweigh the cues of danger, right? And so that's where we're wanting to get to know, right? Because that's where we feel both physical and psychological well-being. And the flavors, I like flavors because in the popular literature, often nowadays, ventral, or the state of regulation, is equated with calm, right? Calm is certainly a flavor of ventral, but there are all sorts of other flavors of ventral too. So when you're feeling that sense of, oh, I'm okay to move through the world, right? Okay enough, you may feel calm, but you could feel playful or passionate or purposeful or strong, or any of these lovely um, experiences, right? So that's ventral, right? And the next step down the hierarchy, and we're going to go back to that one later, so we can um, come back to just you and me, Tami, if that's okay. The next one, the where we go when we begin to feel a bit of anxiety or frustration or overwhelm, we go to sympathetic, which is that fight and flight that most of us know, fight and flight, right? Anger, anxiety, right? And again, there are lots of flavors of that. Like my first flavor that I know I'm entering into that sympathetic anger is I get cranky, right? And everybody around me knows it. Oh, when Deb's getting cranky, watch out, she's heading to sympathetic, right? The anxiety is a bit of a worry that I get stuck in. And then it goes from there. So we're looking for all the different descriptors of sympathetic. And then the next state, the last survival state, where the nervous system takes you as a path of last resort, when all else fails, it takes you to disconnection, to shutdown, which is called dorsal, right? We call it shutdown in the workbook. And shutdown is this place where I have no energy, no interest, right? I'm now sort of lost hope, don't really care, can't manage to do anything, right? Again, if we can look at these survival strategies as adaptive and not move into that judging, self-criticism, self-shame, blame place, we see that our nervous system is simply trying to help us survive, right? So part of this first practice is what I've listed a bunch of words. And again, the nervous system needs choice. In order to really feel safe when it's moving through the world, it needs to not feel trapped. So I've given a whole list of words for each of those categories. And what I'm going to invite you to do, and invite everybody who's with us to do, is um, see which words resonate with you when you think about. We're going to start with sympathetic. So that fight and flight list, and we can put that up now. That fight and flight list, which words really call to your nervous system, call to you first, right? And then which words don't fit your experience of fight and flight.
So, Deb, my first question as somebody looks
Mhm.
at this
Yep.
is they might say, well, it depends on the situation. In this kind
Mhm.
of situation, I relate to this word. And this, how would you respond to that as we do the exercise?
I think that's a yes and, which is the way I answer most questions. Yes and. It can be that there can be specific situations that will bring a specific word to life. But generally, what we know about the nervous system is that when it enters into fight and flight, into anger and anxiety, it has a fairly typical generalized response. So you probably will come up with words that think, "Oh, that word lands for me," and another word that doesn't land for you, right? Like distracted does not really land in my nervous system. That's not an experience of sympathetic mobilized energy that happens for me. It may be for you.
And then what if somebody's like, wow, there's a lot of words I relate to? There's a lot here.
That then in the beginning, again, this is sort of a befriending, get to know your nervous system, information gathering. Circle every word that feels like, oh, that one, that one, that one, right? And then we can become more discerning later. But in the beginning, and what I say to people when we're doing any exercise with the nervous system is, if your nervous system gives you a message, put it on your paper, circle the word, write it down, because it's trying to tell you something. And we don't want to edit in the beginning because our brain might say, oh, that's too many, or you need to stop now, or you're doing it wrong. But your nervous system is giving you information. So you've got a lot of circles going on here. Yeah. Yeah.
And then another question I have about
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
is if the input is a small, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
slightly getting into a flight and
Mm-hmm.
fight state, I might
Yep.
start at annoyed,
Yes.
but it's going to move into, something
Yes.
more intense, like
Yes.
angry,
Yes.
depending on what the input is.
Yeah, and depending on how much of that sympathetic energy is coming into your system, right? When I said I start with cranky or worried, and cranky can move, all the way along to rageful, right? For me, and like if we took your words, you might then begin to order them, right? Like cranky would be my beginning, and then I would be frustrated, and then I might get mad, and then I might end up raging. Infuriated doesn't land for me. So that might be my progression. So I have the range of words, and then I begin to see, how do I move through them? How do I move along? So what happens for you in the fight category? Where do you start?
Well, I can get angry pretty easily. I feel frustrated a lot. Uh, it would be hard for me to get to raging, for
Yep.
example. That
Yep.
would be that doesn't happen very often.
Got it.
I mean, to be honest, I often feel a low level of cranky and annoyed,
Yep.
which I think is an interesting point,
Mm-hmm.
which is, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody who says, God, I feel whether it's cranky, annoyed, or anxious would be another thing. Like, I think might feel anxious all the time in different, like low grade.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, what would you say if somebody had that response?
Yeah, so what we're thinking about here, we're moving into survival strategies, right? So a low level anxious, right, might be when you are still feeling safe and okay in the world. Is that true? Do you feel safe enough? Does the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger, and you just carry that anxiety?
I can certainly see that that is true during certain periods of my life. Yeah.
So in that case, you're still anchored in a state of regulation and have a lot of that anxious energy along with it, right? But as soon as that begins to tip, and I've worked with a lot of people who say, I'm just always anxious. It's my usual state, right? And when we really dig a little deeper, we find out that really their sense is one of not being safe in the world, and anxiety has become their set point. They're just there all the time. That is physically and psychologically unhealthy. That causes, symptoms that are detrimental to your well-being, right? So there's a difference between, am I feeling, safe enough and still carry some alertness, some anxiety, some looking around, making sure energy, or am I feeling unsafe and I'm now feeling that anxiety and a bit of alarm, right? And it can be a very subtle difference, but it's a huge difference to our physical and psychological well-being. And that's why if you circled anxious, right, then as you begin to use this list, you're going to say, okay, I'm feeling anxious. What flavor of anxiety am I in right now? Right? Am I in the anxiety that feels, regulated and just keeping me moving? Or am I feeling the anxiety that comes from a place of, I'm not sure it's safe in this moment?
So I want to ask a beginner question, Deb, because I
Yeah.
think it's really important. And for people who are coming
Mm-hmm.
to learn about these
Yes.
three states
Yep.
with a beginner's mind,
Yeah.
are each of these states distinct from each other, or could I be in all three at the same time, or two of the three at the same time? How do you see that?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, and I will say for people who are really wanting to get to know their states, there are other practices in the workbook and practices that we did in the program we put together that dive in more deeply that way. Can you be in more than one? What I would say is what we're looking at is the relationship between your states, because this state of fight and flight, the state we're going to do next of collapse, and the state of regulation live in your nervous system all the time, right? And really what we're talking about is the intensity, the amount of energy each one is bringing in the moment. So as fight and flight has the greater percentage of energy, takes up more room in your system, you're going to move into these experiences. As shutdown takes over, you're going to move into those. As regulation takes over, you're going to have that. But all of those are, I think about them as layers, and those three layers are doing this all the time, right? All the time, the layers are moving. So what we're looking at really is getting to know each distinct state, and then how do they all go together in my system, right? So in this moment, I have a lot of regulation in my system, and as I'm looking to the next layer back, I have a lot of sympathetic energy moving because I want to make sure we get where we need to go. And then in the way back is that collapse energy, right?
Now, it's interesting that you use this phrase of layers
Mm-hmm.
just for a moment, because I do like math. Is it reasonable to talk about percentages?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So if we did a percentage, and maybe let's do the three lists and then figure out the percentage in your system, right? Because each one is taking up a certain amount. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, let's keep going with your sympathetic activation to have us move through the exercise.
Yeah, there we go. I'm going to move us along. So let's go to the next one and let's go to the shutdown list. So this is that other survival state when sympathetic flooding energy that's driven to help to make me do something and brings anxiety and anger doesn't work. The nervous system, then all the energy drains from the system and I go to shutdown. Ooh, wow, look at that. You got a lot of scribbles on there. Mm-hmm. Yep. Is this a place you know well?
Well, I'm not the person scribbling, just to
Oh, who's
say. I'm
scribbling?
not I'm not sure who's doing the scribbling, but I'd be
Okay.
curious who they are, what they're
Yeah.
experiencing. I'm much more of a fight flight
Yep.
person than
Yep.
than a
Yep.
shutdown
Yep.
person, but I can certainly relate to drained and collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't relate as much to depressed
Mm-hmm.
or invisible or despondent or
Mm-hmm.
dejected.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's interesting in general, this list feels more foreign
Yes. Yes.
to
And
me.
that's really good to recognize, because we have what I call a home away from home in our nervous system, which is the survival state that feels more familiar, that we go to more often. So for you, it's the fight and flight list we did a minute ago. For me, this is my home away from home. Mine's shutdown. This is where I go. So the word that resonates most strongly for me is invisible, and for you, it didn't resonate at all, right? So interesting just to get to know nervous systems. Yeah. So
Deb, we had
you're,
someone who wrote
yeah,
in a question I think is
sure.
interesting. They said, okay, fight, flight, shutdown,
Hmm.
regulation. What about this notion of fawn that we hear about?
Yeah, yeah. So fawn's an interesting concept, and actually Steve Porges and my colleague Rebecca Bailey have an article in preprint which is talking about fawning and appeasement, because those are the two nervous system experiences that we're beginning to play around with. I think when we think about fawn, we have to be careful. We need to define it, because in the beginning, I think it came into popular use because it's another F, right? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and we love things that alliterate in that way. Fawning, in Steve and Rebecca's research and writing, is more of the cognitive decision-making process that happens after we have a nervous system experience. And appeasement is the word they're using for the nervous system experience, which is a non-conscious experience of making sure that I am going along and not seen as a threat to you, because if I'm seen as a threat to you, to your nervous system, I'll be hurt or killed. So that's appeasement. And then fawning is the more cognitive decision making around people pleasing to support that. Yeah.
And would you put appeasing people as a fight, flight strategy?
Yeah. Appeasement is seen as the fight flight, and using cues of social engagement, but not for connection, but to make sure that I'm safe. Yes. Yep.
And then another F word that our
Yep.
very
Yep.
intelligent Zoom participants are asking me about
Mhm.
is flooding. And where
Yeah.
does that fit in? When I feel flooded.
I mean, anytime you're thinking about an overabundance of energy, too much energy, that's sympathetic. So if I'm flooded, then I'm sympathetically overwhelmed, right? Yeah. Yeah. So one of the easier ways to think about these things are like we see on this list, there's not a lot of energy connected to these words. Whereas in the fight and flight list, there's a ton of energy. Sympathetic has all the energy. Shutdown has the I don't have enough energy to really care. I can go through the motions, but I don't really care because I don't have the energy. Yep. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that each one of us has a home away from home,
Hmm.
and your home is shut down, and mine is definitely
Yeah.
fight, flight, and feel flooded.
Yeah.
What is the value of knowing our home away from home?
Well, several things. One, I think it allows us to have more compassion with our experience, right? That because when I am feeling overwhelmed, I move quickly through fight and flight and end up here in shutdown, and I know that, and so I can be gentle with myself and say, "Oh, right, my nervous system felt overwhelmed and just took me to this familiar place of shutdown, and I know how to move out of here because I've done it now for Like I'm 72 for many, many decades, right? So, I have the awareness, I can understand the science behind it, and I can have some compassion. The other thing that I think is helpful is, like, I now know your home away from home is sympathetic. Probably knew that anyway. Mine is shut down, right? So when we're in a connection, doing something together, and you might feel me beginning to disappear, become invisible, you now know, oh, Deb's system is feeling overwhelmed. The cues of danger are too much. And that gives you a different way of, maybe have a different story about me rather than she's bored or she doesn't want to be here. It's, oh, she's feeling unsafe, right? And the same with you. I can be with you and go, oh, she's got a lot of energy going. I love her energy. And oh, maybe now it's getting into the anxiety that's not helpful stage. Yeah. Yeah.
And another word, I think, for this shutdown that someone's
Mhm.
wondering what
Yeah.
your response would be, the word annihilate. Is that also a little bit the sense of feeling annihilated, I'm
Yeah. I mean,
presuming?
yeah, feeling annihilated, feeling not here, not in the world, feeling shamed. All of that is a flavor of shutdown of that dorsal energy, right? And again, our nervous system takes us there to protect us, as crazy as that sounds, right? To protect us. If I move out of being, floating away, not here, my nervous system tells me you're going to do this so that you might recover and live another day. Yeah.
And then freeze obviously is a part of the shutdown
Yeah,
phenomenon.
yeah. Well, freeze, and again, we want to ask for a little more information about freeze, because freeze in its, I can be frozen. Fight, flight, freeze in our old way of thinking about it was this shutdown. I'm frozen because I can't move because I have no energy in my system. That's why I'm frozen. There is another freeze, which is sort of that deer in the headlights freeze, where my muscles are rigid rather than flaccid. They're rigid, and I often have that wide-eyed look. So I'm filled with energy, but I can't move. And that's when sympathetic fight, flight, and dorsal shutdown are stuck on together. So that's a blended state. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
All
it's
right.
interesting that you brought up the blended state, because one other question, and
Mhm.
then we'll move on,
Yeah.
which is somebody asked, what if I have both homes away from home? I have two homes away from home. Do you meet people like that? Or is that maybe someone who hasn't investigated enough to see?
I think most of the time, I rarely encounter people who say I kind of am an evenly divided fight, flight, shut down person, right? Most of us, the nervous system creates what I call an autonomic profile, where we end up in one of those more often than the other. And you might spend enough time in sympathetic to think that's your home away from home. But when you look at it, you think, and yet I always end up in shutdown, right? So maybe you make a stop in sympathetic and stay there a while, and yet you end up in shutdown. So that's the let's be curious and see where we go. Curiosity being if we go to the next list, curiosity I hope is on the next list, because curiosity is what is in ventral regulation. That's the only place we can be curious, is when we're in ventral. So there is no curious, but curious is one of the hallmarks, right? So this is the place, it's not a place where everything is zen or blissful, or, everything is beautiful and wonderful. It may be, we may have those moments, but it's a place where I feel, I love the word enough, right? Regulated enough, safe enough, in my body enough, so that I can navigate the world with a bit of organization and purpose. So what word, and see, calm is the first one I put because people usually use that. Calm does not resonate with my system. It just doesn't land for me. What lands for you?
Well, as you can imagine, Deb, I feel like you know me well, but forthright and honest and
Yes,
purposeful, those
yes,
are those are big words
yeah,
for
yeah,
me that mean a
yes,
lot to me.
yeah,
I feel less connected to calm and peaceful, truth be told.
yeah, 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 yeah. So it's just lovely to see the range of flavors that can exist in a state of regulation, right? And to really, because people ask me all the time and say, well, I don't want to be regulated because then I can't stand up for what I believe in. And yet, as you know, you can be forthright, honest, and purposeful when you're in this place of regulation. And in fact, you will do it better than you would do if you were in sympathetic anger, right? Because you are in that place where I can speak with clarity, right? My prefrontal cortex is online and working with me. So I love that forthright, honest, and purposeful. Absolutely. You can bring your passion to life when you are in this place. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned in your introduction
Mhm.
to this Flavors
Mhm.
of States that there's a hierarchy within the autonomic nervous system. And it's one of
Mhm.
the gifts of polyvagal theory that I
Yes.
found really useful. And I wonder if you can share that here, especially for people who identified with shutdown as
Yeah.
being their home, and how
Yeah.
the understanding of this
Yeah.
hierarchy helps us get back to regulation.
Yeah. So the hierarchy is regulation, fight, flight, shutdown in that order. And that's Steve's brilliant gift to us. His understanding that we move down in that order. So even though my home away from home is shut down, I have to travel through a bit of anxiety, anger before I get there. I just go very quickly. Other people stay longer. So you go from regulation to sympathetic to shutdown, which means to come back up. You have to bring some energy back into your system before you can find regulation again. And I love that you're asking this because I want to say you don't need to go through a big experience of fight and flight to get back to this place of regulation, right? Can we go back to the fight and flight slide for a minute? There we go. So we could, if I'm in shutdown, I'm in that invisible place, right? As I'm coming back up through, I don't want to go to raging or furious, right? Or I might want to go through just a little bit of impatience, right? Because then my energy is coming back into my system, right? I don't want to be desperate because that's going to overwhelm my system, but I could find myself feeling a bit cranky, right? When you begin to come out of shutdown, you feel some energy coming back, and we can feel it in a lot of different ways. So again, if I'm coming out of shutdown and you're with me and I get a little cranky, right? You can look at me and say, "Ooh, I like it. Her system's coming back to life," rather than, "Well, why is she doing that now?" Right? It's a different story when we look at it through the flavors of states. So then if you go back to the sympathetic, yeah, we're at fight and flight now. We're to come here, we need to reach for some of those ventral regulated experiences, right? So if we go to the ventral regulated list of words, other direction. I'm going to come up the hierarchy. There we go. Regulation, right? I'm not going to come from being, cranky or anxious or angry or frustrated to bliss. Certainly, that's way too big a reach. But I might come back to feeling a bit at ease, right? Or a bit more relaxed, and then work my way toward where I'm going. Yeah. So that's the way the system works. We can't take too big a step, or the system can't do that. Yeah.
I wonder, Deb, before we move
Yeah.
on and go further into the next exercise, if you could just give people an example of being either in a state of fight flight or a state of shutdown, and their journey back to regulation and what that might look like just a specific example, very common.
Sure. So, if we start in regulation and, something happens, let's take a pretty common experience rather than a great big thing. So, I'm in a pretty good state of regulation, and then my morning gets going and everything goes off track, right? The internet doesn't work. My grandkids need something that I can't do. The dryer won't turn on. All of these things happen. I am now lost my anchor in regulation, and I am now in anxiety. That's where I usually go first. I'm getting frantic, and then I get angry. right? So I do both of those, right? And then I stay there for a while, but nothing's changing. Nothing's gonna help here. My system takes me to despair, give it up. Don't even try, why bother? Right? And that's usually what the words that come, why bother? It's hopeless, right? Just give it up. Nothing's going to work today, right? And I can feel it in my system as I'm saying that. I can even feel it, right? So I stay there for a bit because I know this place well, right? I think, oh, okay, take a breath. Usually I sigh and I can feel myself beginning to bring a bit of energy back in, saying, I don't know how I'm going to get through this day, but I'm at least going to, and I'm going to pick one thing. I'm going to see if I can, you know, solve the dryer problem. I look for one small thing to do. And as I begin to take an action, even if it's simply getting up and walking toward, that's energy coming back into my system. And as I continue to do that, I feel the energy coming back in. And instead of being frustrated and angry and worried, I can feel a bit of determination, right? Which is where I often go, I'm going to beat this thing. Right. I'm gonna figure this out, which is regulated. That's regulated energy. Right. So, for me, because I've traveled that pathway down to shut down and back up, I thousands of times over my lifetime, I can do it more easily by myself. Other people, it's easier to do with a guide until you learn your own pathway. If you go to sympathetic and that's where you stay, it is much easier to come back to ventral, to come back from fight and flight to regulation because you have all the energy you need, right? You've got an overabundance of energy. It's just disorganized. So all I need to do when I'm there is find a way to organize the energy, which might be to write a list, which might be to take a walk, which might be to do some sort of rhythmic movement. I have the energy I need. I just can't use it when it's like this, right? So it's easier to come back from fight flight to regulation than it is to come back from shutdown because you have to first bring energy back in. Does that help?
It helps a lot. And, we're briefly going to move into the next exercise in just a moment on
Mm-hmm.
fillers and drainers. But
Mm-hmm.
before we get there, I think part of what is so brilliant and helpful about your work, and I would love to just have you comment on it, is I think so often we feel that our nervous system is happening to us
Yep.
and not that we can become active operators of
Right.
it. And I wonder if you can just speak a little bit about what it takes to be in that role of being
Yep.
an active operator instead of just having all of this happen to us.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I do love the nervous system because it will take action without us needing to be involved in that action, right? It's going to do what it needs to do to keep you safe in the way it thinks you need to be safe. So that it will continue to just do what it needs to do. And when we learn to listen to it, when we learn to understand it through, a lot of these exercises that I've created and a lot of the ways of turning toward and listening, then we can partner with it, right? We have the capacity to shape it, and if it feels you are under threat, it's going to take an action anyway. Right. So that's again a lovely both and, right? I don't have to worry that if I learn how to be more regulated, my nervous system's going to forget how to protect me. Right. That was some of my clients had that worry. My trauma survivor clients would say, but if I come to regulation, then I can't protect myself. Right. And what we want to say is if you come to regulation, first of all, you will be able to plan and problem solve better. And your nervous system is going to take you right to sympathetic fight and flight or dorsal shutdown when it needs to. It's not going to forget how to do that. So, it works automatically, and we can partner with it. And again, it's a process. It's a slow process of getting to know your nervous system because we're not taught to do that, right? This is all foreign language to many people. I know when I was writing Anchored with your amazing team, there was a question about using ventral sympathetic dorsal in some of the language, right? And I said, I think we need to do it because this should be language every human understands. And then you can come up with your own language, like regulation, fight, flight, shutdown. But it's that knowing both, because your nervous system is exquisitely working every moment, moving you down and up through these states, right? And again, we all do that. We all dysregulate. Every human dysregulates many times a day, in small ways, sometimes in big ways. And when we learn how to create those pathways to come back, like we've just been working on, the nervous system will bring you back.
Well, I have a further question here, which is this capacity to make a choice, to
Yep.
say, I'm going to get energy back into my system and just do something. I can, that's a certain position or witnessing consciousness. I'm not quite sure what word to use, but the capacity to choose.
Yep.
And my question is, how do we develop more of that? So
Yes.
when we're in either fight, flight, or shutdown, we can access that
Yeah.
choice-making
Yeah.
capacity.
So that's a beautiful question, because when we're deep in it, we can't do it. So all of these practices that we want to explore and experiment with, we want to do when we have enough regulation on board to be able to be aware and intentional and mindful about creating them. Because then when I get taken out and I get taken into that dorsal, invisibility and numbness and not here, I have something that I have practiced. Usually I have people write it down, grab a card. It's a reminder. Oh, this is what I have created with my nervous system for just this moment in time. And then you can grab it and begin to use it. That's the process, right? We need to create it when we're not in it, so that when we're in it, we can grab it and use it. Yeah.
All right, let's do the second practice,
All
fillers
right.
and drainers.
Yeah, let's do it. So we're going to take, you've started to get to know your nervous system. Now we're going to apply that in a specific moment and begin to look at what nourishes you, what fills you, right? And what is taking you into survival states, what drains you. So let's think about a time when you felt drained first, a moment, a tiny moment when you felt, ooh, that this, as I'm looking back on it now, you know, I was feeling not in that place of regulation. I was feeling some of that dysregulation. And then you're just noticing what happened in your body, what behaviors came, and what were your beliefs, your thoughts. Because again, your nervous system manages all those. Your nervous system brings you body sensations. It prompts you to do certain things. It brings feelings. And by the way, your nervous system feeds that energy and information to your brain, and your brain makes up a belief or a story about it, right? So we've got a moment when you felt drained and then a moment when you felt filled. Because again, nervous system wants to compare and contrast, right? That's how we learn, with a comparison experience. So we're comparing when we felt drained and when we felt filled, right? And then the third part is we're going to think of a experience to fill in the boxes. We're going to fill in the filler and drainer boxes, right? So go ahead and think, what do you notice are drain things that are drainers for you? How do you feel drained in your body? Do you have a body sensation of feeling drained?
I definitely get irritated when I feel drained. I feel like I don't have the energy to do what I need to do. There's too
Yeah,
many things. There's not enough time. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
get kind of snippy.
Yeah. And what is there a belief or a thought that comes along with that?
Yeah, it's kind of like, leave me alone. I've got more than I can handle already. Come on.
Right,
Something like
right.
that.
All right. So how about fillers? How does your body show you you've filled?
Well, I was reflecting specifically just today, this morning. I have 3 sessions that I'm hosting today, which is a lot for me.
Oh,
And so I felt drained because I also have some house guests, and without going into too much detail.
yeah.
But when my partner was asking me to do more things, I was like, and I got But then when she stepped forward and said, I'll take care of that, and when she actually took care of this and took care of that, I
Mm.
felt supported. And that was a form of feeling
Yeah.
filled. It was like, it's
Yeah.
not just me alone trying to
Right.
do this, but I have a support person helping me. And
Love it.
that was tremendously filling.
Yeah. And how did your body show you that?
There was definite like relaxation,
Yeah.
release,
Yeah.
and I could feel support under me
No,
too. Like,
lovely.
oh, I feel supported.
Yeah. So you had some of those regulated words that would have come to life in that moment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've begun to identify how you experience draining and filling. So this last piece is reflect on a day from the recent past and list the fillers and drainers that you experienced that day. You could take a day, you could just take a moment, you could take, an hour this morning, you could take, anything you want. So think of a moment in time and what are the fillers and what are the drainers, because as we make our lists, this is how we begin to get to know specifically, oh, this is what happened in that experience. And then as we do more of these fillers and drainers lists, we begin to see a pattern, because with the nervous system we're looking for patterns, right? Like you probably knew already, but we're shown again this morning that when your partner does something, right, shows up and does something, not says they're going to do, but actually does something, that's a filler for you, right? So then we begin to look for that, and your partner knows that, right? This is how your nervous system is wired, right? And you probably know something about how your partner's nervous system is wired so that you can offer a filler for their nervous system as well.
Can you share with us, Deb, from your experience, what are some of the fillers and drainers for you?
Yeah, so a filler for me is somebody, because I live alone. Well, I live with Buddy, my cat, but I don't have another human here. So a filler for me is when someone reaches out and touches me through an email or a message, right? Because I feel connected in the world. So that's a beautiful filler, and um, it's a small thing that has a big resonance in my system. So that's a filler, right? Being able to open my windows and hear the birds, that's a filler, right? Because again, for me, it's about connection. That's connection to the world outside, connection to people, right? Drainers for me are when I get to the end of the day and I feel like my to-do list has not gotten any shorter, haven't crossed anything off it. That immediately I can feel that draining. Drainer for me is when um, I look around the house and it's disorganized, right? That having things out of place is a drainer for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Just to ask a question
Yeah.
about this
Mm,
metaphor or
yeah.
image of something being filled and something being drained.
Mm,
That seems like it makes a lot of sense, especially for the shutdown
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
experience.
mm-hmm.
Uh, because you mentioned it's a lack of energy, and
Yeah.
so you don't want all your energy drained. You know,
Right.
help me understand it in terms of the sympathetic
Where you have
home
way too
away from
much. Right.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this notion
So,
of
so
fillers and drainers.
it's draining your capacity for regulation. It's draining
I got you.
regulating energy. And so what's coming in instead is, you know, frenetic when it's going to sympathetic fight flight, or it's going to nothingness when it's going to do, but it's draining the connection, the safety, the regulation. Yeah. 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 And I think it's interesting if you think about a moment in time. I do this practice um, not uncommonly because I'm curious about, because I'll have a thought, ooh, that felt hard for me, right? And then I'll go back and I'll look at what were the fillers, what are the drainers, right? To think, because, you know, if my system had a difficult experience, Maybe it still was on the side of filling, but what fillers were not there that might have helped? Or what drainers, predictably show up in my life? Because as we begin to get to understand the predictability of it, we can begin to shift some of the drainers and bring in more of the fillers, right? It's a way to get to know, what is your nervous system telling you? What helps, right? What helps? What creates a barrier to feeling regulated enough to move through your day, and what helps you do that? And so we're just calling them fillers and drainers, and we're concretely writing them down, because again, it's the concreteness that helps us begin to be able to do something with it, right? Like for you were very specific, saying it's not saying, it wasn't the saying, I'm going to take this off your plate. It was the doing, right? That's very concrete. I know that that's helpful, right? Think about that in our any kind of relationships. When I know specifically what it is, I can do it, right? Most people, I think, want to offer the help that another person is looking for. We just sometimes don't know what that is specifically, right? So your nervous system said it, the saying it doesn't get me to regulation, the doing of it does. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting to think about this notion of an amount of regulating energy that
Mhm.
we have in our system. And I wonder, Deb, I mentioned that you're this powerful co-regulating force, not just for me, for the thousands of students and readers and people who take your online programs and meet with you in person. You increase our regulating energy. And it feels to me that there's something about connection in general when we feel connected to other loving people. You gave the example of people reaching out to you and how that fills your regulating energy. Can you say specifically, what is it about feeling connected that so increases our amount of regulating energy?
Well, it's as we said before, it is a necessity for um, survival for we humans. We come into the world having to have another nervous system meet us and greet us in order to survive. And then over the course of our lifetime, we are still looking for that in order to feel, fully alive and thrive. And the science tells us that my nervous system's regulation sends a message to your nervous system that I'm safe and welcoming you into connection. And then your nervous system, joins, and there's this reciprocity that happens, that then builds, right? If I'm sending you a message that I'm safe and, welcoming of your connection, and you are stuck in fight and flight, right? I can increase the power of that connecting energy. I can send it a bit stronger. I can talk, I can act for your system. I know I have to do something to show you, right? For other people, they want words, right? We begin to know, but as I send more power, that energy, that regulating invitation, your nervous system feels it, right? That's the power, I think, of regulation. And I often say ventral regulation is an unopposable force, because I do believe as we go through the world in a regulated state, we are sending that message without having to say anything. We're sending that regulated energy out into the world, and other nervous systems feel it, right? So in some ways, if we want to, get very, I don't know, granular about it in some way, when I'm regulated and I'm sending that out into the world and other nervous systems are receiving it, they then can come to regulation and send that out. And isn't it a lovely thought about a ripple effect, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, but yes, and if we miss co-regulation, right? The research on loneliness is profound. Lonely beings are physically and psychologically ill, right? We suffer so with loneliness, right? So if you have no other nervous system to connect with, you're going to move into loneliness, and you're either going to move into that fight flight drivenness to find someone, or that dorsal why bother, there's no one there. right? Whenever we're in one of those survival states, we suffer. We suffer. And so we know that a welcoming nervous system that's regulated and curious and just there gives you the ability to feel some of that come alive in your system. If nothing else, and I teach this to new clinicians, I say, you may not know any model of therapy. And it doesn't matter if you show up regulated and spend an hour in a regulated state with your client, that is a profound intervention in and of itself. So if we just spend a regulated moment in time with another human, that is powerful.
We're hearing from people in the chat who want to know if you have any suggestions here. We're coming to a close soon, but how to stay regulated when you're interacting with a dysregulated person.
Yeah, and that is so hard to do, and I think so common in many family systems, many systems. Um, your responsibility is to strengthen your ability to find ventral and anchor there. And there are lots of ways to do that. Finding your own, I call them anchors, right? So actually touchstones, things you hold, things you remember, images that help remind you that ventral is possible. You know, I tell people all the time, you have a ventral system wired into your biology, right? It's inside you. You don't have to reach out here for it. It is inside you. Some breath practices work for people, some movement practices. Again, what I encourage people to do is experiment and make your own menu, because my menu and your menu are going to look very different, right? We know some of the general things, like nature is a regulator, but what kind of nature and how we engage is individual to our systems, right? Um, Music is a regulator. Sound, of all sorts, touching things. There's all these ways that we can feel our ventral system come alive, right? Which is why, if you go back and you found some of those words that help you recognize ventral, the next time you feel one of those words come alive, stop and think, what's going on that's helping me be there? Because that'll give you a clue to what goes on your menu.
And as we're concluding, Deb, I'm curious to hear a little bit more. You created these 50 exercises for the
Yeah.
workbook, and then you had to choose which ones to put into the 6-week course.
Yeah.
And I'd love to understand a little bit more what went into that decision of these are the ones I'm going to put into the course and why.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting process, actually, to choose and figure out what makes sense. And they are a progression, right? So that they begin with 2 exercises from the section 1, the getting to know your nervous system, and then the other 4 are from the section 2, which is sort of more working with your nervous system. So, it was intentionally done to help people gently move into that connection with their nervous system, and then begin to play with, how do I shape my system in a different way? What are some of the things I can do that are, again, I like things that are simple and easy to reach for, because I think that's what the nervous system needs. It's lovely to have, lovely meditation practices, right? All these great big practices. And yet, in the beginning, the nervous system would like something this big so that it could feel successful. So that's what the workbook 50 practices are. They're small things we can do to build capacity. And when I was going through trying to decide, oh my God, out of 50, which 6? Well, part of it is what feels like it's really nice to lead people through, because some of them are easy to do on your own, and others are like, oh, I really want to have a moment to help people understand the larger concept behind this and the science behind this, and then lead them through it. So we'll see. I will be curious. I would love to hear from people who, take the course. When they get through, what have they learned about their nervous system? How has it changed how they move through the world? That's when I know that I've done something that's meaningful. When people say, here's what happened for me, and here's how I'm living life differently. So I hope we get some of that.
Again, friends, you're invited to join us creating a sanctuary within. It's 6 weekly classes that Deb recorded along with 2 live Q&A sessions. As we end, Deb, I wonder if you could speak to something like the goal of learning how to befriend our nervous system. Is it something like, I'm curious how you relate to this word, fluency? That it's like a language. Oh, I've learned the language now of my nervous system. I can speak it fluently. Or how would you describe the goal of this befriending process?
I like that. I like speaking the language of the nervous system. I like to invite people to look through the eyes of the nervous system from the nervous system perspective, which is sort of the same. And I think when you learn to look through that lens or speak that language, you invite people around you to also do that, because this is more than me understanding my nervous system. It's you and me understanding our nervous system and having a language that we can now use, so that if I sent you a message one day and said feeling shut down, right, you might simply send me back a picture or thinking about you, because you know my nervous system, and I don't have to tell you any more than shut down, right? I don't have to give you all the details or all that, just, not feeling regulated, and you might send me something back. So it's a nice way to be able to be with someone without having to hear all of the cognitive story that we make up, which we sometimes get so pulled into, when really my nervous system just wants to feel connected.
A final point is to have you address this word sanctuary, creating a
Yes.
sanctuary within. I notice it's a word that holds a lot of feeling for me. And the notion, especially for those of us who have experiences of feeling dysregulated and not like our nervous system is a sanctuary, this
Right.
promise that it could be a sanctuary.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, that system of regulation, safety, and connection is wired into your biology. It is there just waiting for you to find it. Right. And that's the work that I've done with trauma survivors for years. And the work that I've done on my own system is that remembering, oh, right, it is there. Right. I don't have to create something and bring it in. It lives in my biology. I just need to find out, how do I dip a toe in it? Because then it's going to grow. So that sanctuary lives within every human's biology.
Thank you so much, Deb. It's always great to be with you. I always feel simple language here better after I spend an hour with you than before. It's always a gift. Thank you so
I'm
much.
glad. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mhm.
Thanks, friends. Thanks for being with us. Be well, everyone.